Greetings. I'm beginning a series of images, talks about images, that is, that talks about images that I've produced and primarily for the sake of archiving the data that is in those images. And I've chosen to begin with images from this anthology, which is a 30-year retrospective that I produced about 10 years ago now. So I thought fittingly I'd begin with this cover image, which is actually on the front and back of the publication that was produced. So yeah, that's what the image looks like, and of course I'll have an insert in totality. And this image was made in the early part of my career, and I'll read the caption, which says, "The Green Sisters on the back stoop of the guest house built in the 1880s by their ancestor John Donne. Nothing remains of this house, which was dismantled by land invaders. Megeta, KwaZulu-Natal, 1982. So, as I said, this was a very early image, and this anthology is called Call and Response, which I'll speak about at some point. So, a very early image, considering I first picked up a camera in around about 1980. I had never seen or handled a SLR camera before then. I was 23, I think. And so, yeah, at the age of 24, 25, I was exploring, I guess. And, you know, that's the great thing about a camera, is that it's a way, like a passport. Often people will say that, and it certainly was the case for me. A passport to get you into situations and in front of people that you wouldn't ordinarily easily do. So in this case, I had heard about this house that had been built, the last remaining structure built by this ancestor John Donne, who is my ancestor as well, and the ancestor of these young ladies that are in this image. And he's my great-grandfather. And I wanted to go and see this place and photograph it. So the house was in a rather remote part of the community in which I lived. And it's another long story which will emerge in dribs and drabs about this ancestor, John Donne, that we are part of. I've spoken about it in many other places. I produced an exhibition called Blood Relatives, of which this image became a part of as well. So in the 30 years anthology, we have, you know, I have excerpts from the various projects I worked in that 30-year period, of which Blood Relatives was one, and that looked at these descendants of this ancestor, John Donne. So that was the beginning of that project, if you like. And because it was in this remote place, off the beaten track, literally, I happened to have an uncle who was visiting at the time, well, my dad's cousin technically, who had a four-wheel drive pickup truck. And four-wheel drive vehicles were very rare back in those days. So I took the opportunity of asking him to take me, and he was an adventurous soul, Basil Nunn, took me down, and he knew some of the people, of course, around in the community. And he took me to this place, which really needed off-road vehicle to get to. So this very imposing building, as you can see here, if you look carefully, I'll insert a high resolution image of this so it can be seen properly. You'll be able to see these very 1880 style building blocks that the place was built of, and found the family living there at the time, the Green family, and who were renting the structure from the community, and I think at a nominal price, really. And made those images, a series of images there, of which a couple are in this book. I'll talk about them at some other point. And that this image, that was of these two young girls, made it onto the front cover of this exhibition and anthology, is I suppose testament to the simplicity that is in this image, both in its design and the way that it's composed, and the elements of the color, the paint there. So it's very straight on image. They're the two of them, and then of course the magic of this hula hoop circle, which just completed that image, and of course the drips and splatters of paint and scratches on the wall that give a real homegrown authenticity and basic simplicity, which is again further imprinted in these very simple dresses that these two supposedly twin girls wear, quite worn, homemade by the looks of things, barefoot. These are the kind of things that made for quite a potent, poignant image that I'm really proud of. I realized that I got the names of these girls wrong, because I hadn't bothered to ask them their names, and that's a characteristic of the way I photograph, in that I seldom, and I could be faulted for it, but it's my style, that the names of people, I have a problem when I meet people. I easily forget their names. They slip out of my mind, and I take for some people ages to remember those names. So for me, images are more generic. They refer to the human spirit. So I'm interrogating humanity rather than the specificity of people, the people that I'm photographing, and whether they like it or not, whether others like it or not. Those images are generic images for the human condition. And this is a classic example of that. I went on, at that point I was I was really there just to explore this house that I'd heard of, which I suppose I had an instinct that there was something special about this homestead, because it's something that united us in this very unique and different community. I'll speak later about John Donne perhaps in more detail, but he was a white man who became a chief. His parents were 1820 settlers. He had, as a chief, he had many wives and many children, and we were all the descendants of this man. And this house, he had as a chief, he had 5 homesteads. These were like compounds. Each one was a compound And by the time I was in my 20s, he had died in the late 1880s. That was the only structure left throughout the province of the 5 different homesteads that he had. So nothing remains. This house no longer exists. It was destroyed by the land invasions. A very contentious and a difficult issue, but a heritage site, whether you liked the heritage it implied or not. When I was making the documentary of the same name, Blood Relatives, we visited that site, and it was difficult to find the foundations. So completely had it been erased and removed. So these few images are pretty much all that remain of that structure, and an object that we had some discussions about making into a heritage site, a kind of a museum, that would be something that would serve the functions of memory. So the memory is now embedded in these images, what is left of it, and of course in historical accounts of the life of this transfrontier man who was our ancestor. So there'll be more, and I will be moving on at some point through this book, looking at various different images and talking about them in the same light that I've done today. And I hope you like this very personal and heartfelt, I guess, discussion about the work that I produce. Thank you for watching.